What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This is episode number 254. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources, and joining me on the line, the Brinoceros, Brian Wong.
If I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants.
Oh, that's nice. All right, so this show is going to be a pretty interesting one, I think, from top to bottom. First things first, we're going to be talking about Khans of Tarkir, initial impressions, all of that. We're going to be doing multiple crack packs, and we're really going to try to, Brian and I have had a chance to draft a decent amount of times already, and I think we both can't wait to tell you guys our thoughts. And then we've also got a bit of an announcement at the end of the show as well that you will not want to miss. Before we do any of that, though, Card Kingdom. They are, of course, our sponsors. They have been for years, and there's a good reason for that. They're the best in the biz. Really, one of the top-notch, biggest, most productive websites for Magic cards out there. We know there's a lot of options, and I'll admit it. There's a lot of great options to buy Magic cards. There's a lot of good, trusted stores and big websites and stuff out there. So why should you choose Card Kingdom over them? Well, we think that they give you the best combination of fairest prices, best customer service, quickest shipping, and best selection. So, it's like sort of this, you go right down the middle, you get a little of the best from all of it, and you end up with, well, the best store. And that's the one that we recommend, cardkingdom.com. Please do check them out. Brian, I can't remember if I actually announced it on LR, but I'm going to do it again because I've had a few people on Twitter saying, when did this start? Talking about constructed resources. Mm-hmm. So John Laux and I have started constructed resources. I want to make sure that that's out there again. I tweeted it. I thought I talked about it on the podcast, but maybe I didn't do it enough or something. So I'm going to do it here. We've been asked for ever since I started LR for, hey, is there, the constructed version of it, with the same type of mentality and approach that we have, for here. And there hadn't been from us at least, and now there is. And John Laux and I have started constructed resources. You can find it at crcast.com. The link is on LRcast as well. They're all kind of one big thing. And we've already done 2 episodes. We did an introductory episode just to sort of set the tone for how we want the show to go in general. And then the next week we did our Khans of Tarkir set review. So that's our first set review for CR. And I'm super excited to start that project. It's been brewing for a long time, but you need the right co-host. You need everything to kind of line up, and it's not that simple. But with John able to do podcasting again, and also fired up about getting back into Magic and specifically brewing new decks in standard and modern and so forth, it just felt like the time was right. So we set it up and we're off and running. So you guys, again, you can find it on crcast.com. There's subscription links at the top for RSS feeds for iTunes. You can also search for constructed resources in iTunes store, and you can also just listen to it on that site on crcast.com, just like you can on LRcast. It's all free. There's a direct download link if you'd rather just do it that way. However it is that you prefer to consume the show, you can do it. I've made sure to try to get it. I am also going to try to get it on Stitcher Radio, by the way, which is another way that some group of people listen to the show. So that's out there. I just wanted to make sure that I put an exclamation point on that because I'm excited about it, and I'm really looking forward to see where that goes. Go ahead.
I want to hear John sign off, but I don't cherry pick. I actually listened to the whole episode. I'm not finished with it yet.
Gotcha. Yeah, he's taken to making some type of competition between you two.
I feel like, because I invented sign-offs that like he's just taking them to the next level. I'm really excited for him.
The sad part is he'll never hear that because he only zips to the end to listen to your sign-off, I think. Maybe he will. He might prove me wrong, but I'm not going to tell him. I'm just going to see if he hears it. All right. So why don't we start off things, Brian, with a pair of crack packs. I think this is the best way to get the conversation started on what we've seen. We'll probably get a few of our thoughts about the different clans and different cards out a little early here, but we've got them lined up for afterwards as well. So first things first, though. Yes. The
Khans of Tarkir is
smell.
looking really boring, said no one ever.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, I think that, it feels like I was talking to Randy Bueller about it when we were doing a draft, and he said the ceiling is best set ever. Like, he isn't calling it that yet because who knows? But he's like, look, it still could be, right? Like, where I think that even at this point with certain sets, we've kind of said, well, I'm kind of seeing how things are starting to shake out, and this looks interesting, but, not on the same level as, maybe having the potential to be the next Innistrad or something like that.
Yeah, in case you were worried that Magic could jump the shark, I think this set should calm everyone down.
Yeah, and by the way, thank you guys for listening to the set review shows. That set review show is now from Cons, the Commons and Uncommons one, is now our most downloaded show ever.
That was fast.
Ever. And it's been out for 2 weeks. And the thing about our show is that it gets downloaded after the fact quite a bit, like more than you'd think. Like if you were to ask me, I would think that a podcast like ours would get downloaded a whole bunch in that 1 week and then it would just like trail off into nothing. But people use them as reference. They come back to them and they say, I'm gonna buy a box of Cons, but I want to know what's going on. So they'll listen to it. Or it'll come back on Magic Online and they'll listen to it. So we get these, this sort of steady stream of them, but the initial push was absolutely unbelievable for this set. I think Wizards really has hit a home run with Cons here.
Oh, it's so cool, flavorful, just so much depth to it. I'm really excited to learn about this. Me too.
Set. Now, what do you think about Canyon Lurkers? This is the 4 and a red for a 5/2, but it's got Morph for 3 and a red.
I find it to be pretty underrated, and I think that goes for a couple of the morphs that unmorph for less than 5, just because your opponents never see it coming, and you're more likely to get value when they block with, like, say, an 0/5 creature on it, because everybody thinks, oh, that turn 4 is safe, turn 5 is the danger zone, and you can just smash them with the Canyon Lurkers.
Right, and the reality is that turn 4 is safe for your 2/2 creature, right? And like so that you can trade if that's what you want to do. But I think a lot of people have misapplied that to other things, to creatures that aren't 2/2s, for example. And I think that matters. And plus, man, 5 is just a ton of damage. The thing that caught my eye in the set review and still does about Canyon Lurkers is the sequencing, right? You can go face down morph turn 4 and bash for 5. And that's really impressive. I mean, yeah, it takes your whole turn to do it, but I kind of view it as playing like a 5/2 haste on turn 4 with a little bit of a downside in the sense that, they can interact with it before that.
That's not necessarily the best effect, but it's a very unique effect. There aren't many 3-drops that can attack for 5 the next turn.
Yeah. Smite the Monstrous is next.
I'm still on board with main decking 1. But I'd be careful with more.
Yeah, I had 2 of them in one of my drafts. I played one in the main and one in the side, and I knew exactly when I wanted both and exactly when I wanted 0.
Yep, and I think 1 is the sweet spot where you should start with.
Oh, God, this pack is getting good already. Treasure Cruise.
Yeah, I think Treasure Cruise is another card that I really want one of. The first Treasure Cruise is so great. And I have not been disappointed, and even in a deck without any Delve Enablers whatsoever, I'm still really excited to have one Treasure Cruise.
Yeah, I did one and somebody called it a Delve Cestral Recall.
Yeah.
I was like, I'll take it. Oh, man, this pack is actually great. Mardu Horde Chief.
Which one is that?
So that's the 2 and a white 2/3 with Raid. You get a 1/1 warrior.
Haven't had a chance to play with it yet. Can't imagine that it's bad.
It is good. Yeah, so that's another good one. All right, finally we got a mediocre card here. Dragon Scale Boon. That's 3 and a green for an instant. You put 2 +1/+1 counters on target creature and untap it.
Quite good in Abzan, though. I've
yes,
noticed,
it is.
Yeah, with the like Abzan Battle Priest, the one that gets lifelink with 1/1 counters on it, or Abzan Falconer, you can do some really good starts. It's so much worse than Feat of Resistance, but still, if you're Abzan, like you want a bunch of those effects, and I'm happy to play this one for sure.
Yeah, it's funny. It's just in a set with so many really solid. Like, there's not as broad a number of combat tricks as there was in Theros, because of the lack of heroic in this set. But the ones that we did get, they pack a big punch. +6/+6, +3/+3 and trample. This one's +2/+2 and untap it, and they stay. Like, the counters stay. Like, it's funny because it's a hotly contested spot, but I mean, Dragon Scale Boon just happens to be like near the bottom of the list, even though it's still quite good.
I think you pointed out something important, though. We're coming out of Theros where it just felt like you could get any number of combat tricks without even trying. So just like kind of a mediocre one was not important. But here in Cons, it's not like that. You don't just fall out of bed into 5 combat tricks.
Right.
And I think this green one's actually pretty good.
Sidisi's Pet is next. I have to admit, I'm not a huge fan of this ape.
No.
It's the 3 and a black 1/4 lifelink that you can morph for 1 and a black.
Yeah, during the set review, I wasn't sure how just your run-of-the-mill morph would be. Ones that didn't really get bigger or more exciting. Would you want to play them or not? I think Sidisi's Pet, I really don't want to play it. You can, of course. It's never that bad, but Mostly, I want the morphs that get bigger, and Sidisi's pet is just meh.
Yeah, and what I've seen from what I've seen, there's plenty of morphs that
Yes.
get bigger. Like this,
Right.
the morph slot is quite contested. Oh, here's another one that I'm curious to talk about when we get to the clans is Alpine Grizzly. It's the 2 and a green for a 4/2 bear.
Yeah, how good Alpine Grizzly is really going to depend on how well you can support it. I got to Savage Punch with Alpine Grizzly at the pre-release. That it's as ridiculous as you would expect. Just such a huge chunk of damage on your opponent. You can kill basically anything with that play. Really, really strong. I mean, if you don't have tricks or removal, the Alpine Grizzly is really not that much better than your stock 2/2. But if you can clear the way for it, oh, it's so good.
Yeah, I've found it best in Teamer on multiple levels. Enabling Ferocious is part of it, but also the fact that you get the blue and the red spells that you can use to clear away blockers, even temporarily, and beat down. I had a deck that had the, what's the blue X Frost spell?
Yes, Icy Blast.
Icy Blast, and it's just like my opponent had a totally reasonable. It was my friend Woodrow, and we were playing at the local shop. He had a perfectly reasonable draw, 2-3-4 or whatever, right? And I went 2-3-4 into Icy Blast, and it was just like, he's like, really? I'm like, take 7 or take 8 or take 10 or whatever it was, and he's got like a turn,
Yep.
and so yeah, pretty nasty.
Yeah, I mean, like Ferocious isn't. Like when we looked at the spoiler, it didn't really seem like there were that many rewards for Ferocious, but I think it comes up enough that it does influence your play choices, and you actually get into that position where you think, "Ooh, do I need to save my Grizzly here just because it has 4 power?" And I think just sprinkling it in just enough that it matters, but it's not like the only thing that matters when you're playing Teamer.
Yeah, because it's nice because even if you don't, take advantage of Ferocious, it's still 4 power for 3 mana. Like it's going to hit pretty hard.
Right.
Unless, of course, it's facing down a Rotting Mastodon, which is the 2/8 for 5 mana.
Yeah, I mean, we pegged this as one of the cards that would be underrated but not great. I still haven't seen anybody play it, but honestly, like that just blocks so well on turn 5 against any face-down creature.
Yeah, I played it. I think it faces a problem that we've seen. I mean, I think it's a problem, maybe not a problem, but it's something that I've seen since I started playing heavily again, which is 5-drops. They're always so competitive because you just don't need that many. I mean, your deck only wants 2-3 of them or whatever total, right?
Yep.
And so, they're not like 2-drops where you can kind of go for a wide different look at, well, maybe I want a really aggressive 2-drop like a 3/1, or maybe I want a 1/4 2-drop or something like that can block great or whatever. And you have all these choices with your 5s. It's like they all need to be, efficient and top of the line, and Rotting Mastodon just isn't. It just does one thing really well and does everything else kind of very poorly. And I think that it's going to suffer from that, even though I think, I still agree with what we thought, which is that, if that is what you want to do, this is your man. I mean, this thing is 8 toughness. Like, nothing's getting through it.
Right. And so you also have to consider if this is near the top of your curve, do you really want a blocker at the top of your curve? Most decks would probably not.
Right.
Because you figure you're holding the fort to do something even more powerful, and that means it's probably more expensive as well. And also 5 is the number when you want to start flipping your own morphs, and this takes you off curve in that regard.
Exactly. 5 has proven to be a super, super important point on the mana curve from that perspective as well.
Yep.
Rakshasa's Secret. This is the 2 and a black sorcery. They discard 2, you mill 2.
Mm-hmm. Very reasonable to play 1, I think. If you're delving, I would go up to 2. This is not a card that you have to main deck, though.
Now, I wanted to ask you about this. I actually had some experience with this card. I played it myself once. I had it played against me once. The first thing is against Sultai, it's a little weak, right? It's a little weaker. Like, you're like, oh, they're like, hey, sweet. I get to now play my Hooting Mandrills turn early or 2 turns early that I wasn't. Now, I don't think that's enough reason. Like, them pitching cards still matters, right? It's just maybe you've lessened the blow a little bit on it. But the thing that I realized is that in a 3-color set, I felt almost like the times when I resolved this, I almost felt like I wasn't getting value on it that I would want because my opponents were ditching cards that they couldn't interact with anyway. Meaning, like, I was they were like, oh, I can't cast these anyway. You know, they're like, my mana sucks or whatever. Like I'm almost like letting them off the hook for having bad mana. And they're just like, I'll get rid of these 2 gold cards that I'm like, 2 land drops and a color away from hitting or whatever. And I'm like,
Right.
well, I'm not exactly like stripping away these key bombs that they were going to just like windmill on me the next turn. Now, if the game goes really long, they're going to find that mana. So I might just be happy that those cards are gone anyway. But like, I don't know. It made me feel like my initial reaction to it was like, that doesn't feel as good. Like if I'm making people discard spells that they sometimes can't cast anyway, is it like, does that make the card worse?
I think in both regards, Delve and people having poor mana makes an argument for holding the Rakshasa's Secret until they have 2 cards in hand,
Okay.
and you know that either you're going to hit the Delve cards out of their hand, right, and then you take away the value that you've given up by filling their yard, or B, like eventually late in the game they are going to have those colors, and just like the top of people's curves are so powerful in this set. Like the gold spells are kind of insane. If you can nab 2 of those, it's actually pretty strong. So
That's true.
Maybe like the turn 3 Secret is a little bit worse than it is in your average set, but the turn 5 or 6 Secret might be better.
Yeah, the other one that happened that I noticed that made me feel bad also was that my opponent would go like morph, and then I'm like Rakshasa's Secret, and they're like, okay, discard 2 spells that matter, right? Like, okay, those are good, and then they just dump all their mana into unflipping their morphs over the next 2 turns, and it just doesn't feel like it has the same punch where I just get them on empty,
Right.
and I'm just like, you're out, like now
Right.
now it's my game to win or whatever, and you're top decking. Instead, they're just like, shrug, 5 mana, flip over my 5/5 trample, hit you next turn. 7 mana, make a 6/7 or whatever. And I'm kind of like, I feel like this is more of a gut reaction where I'm like, that didn't really have the same effect that I normally want it to, but I think that I might just be overlooking the fact that like, well, you also didn't have to deal with these 2 cards that they discarded, which they would have been able to do all of it,
Right. No, definitely that's an important point, because people pack power in their morph, in their face down morphs that you wouldn't have in other sets.
Okay. So I'll keep that. I'm going to keep an eye on Rakshasa's Secret. Oh God. Because this pack couldn't get any better. Our first uncommon is Mardu Heartpiercer.
That's been my favorite card so far.
This is the nut. I have been in. I'll read it first. 3 in a red for a 2/3 human archer with raid, and if you've triggered raid, then you get to shock something. You get to 2 damage to a creature or player. It's a it's a 1/8/7 creature. It's a Necrotal. It's a I get to kill something when I enter the battlefield. So the question is, do you get to kill something often enough to make it actually earn that title? And the answer is, yeah, you sure do. You get to of course the primary target being a face down morph creature, right? That's a thing that I think that get kills a lot. But there's a lot of utility creatures floating around, and you can attack into one of these high toughness things and do 4 damage to it. Maybe they've taken their disowned ancestor, the 0/4 black creature with Outlast, and they've put like a counter on it, and you can attack them with your 3/3 or whatever, and they're like, sure, block, and they've done that the last 3 turns, and now you're like Heartpiercer, finish it off. Like that kind of stuff happens all the time. This card, I've been past 2 of these in 2 different drafts and have just jumped ship to play them.
Yeah, that sounds right to me. This card is so strong in a morph set because it kills morphs, but also normally a 4-mana 2/3 is like kind of a like unexciting body, but it's actually a pretty good attacker because it just attacks through morphs very well itself, as in addition to that. So I think this might be the best uncommon in the set, and like so far it's been my favorite card.
It's been unbelievable too, and I think that what you'll see is the first time that you get to have like, let's say a 2/3 curve, like you play a 2-drop, maybe a 2/2 2-drop, and then like a morph. And then on your 4th turn, you attack with both and do a morph, and your opponent says no blocks, because they've got some important morph creature for later. And then you go land Heartpiercer, kill your morph. Like they just stare at the board. I did this exact sequence at the shop, and they just look at your board like, that is just unbeatable. Like how, because now you've also got a 2/3. So if their plan was to play another face down morph on turn 4 and then flip it up on turn 5, they just take all of the damage again. And you get to be the first one to have your 5th land for your morph, so they can't trade. It's just stupid.
When you add tempo and card advantage onto one thing and you make it, with a reasonable price, it's just hard to be better than that card.
Yeah. Yeah. Heartpiercer is my number 1 out of this pack so far. Wow. This next one's good too, though. High Spire Mantis. This is the 2 red white for a 3/3 with Flample.
Yeah. Very, very solid. Goes in 2 clans, which is important. Still, I think I'd have to give the edge to the Heart Piercer. Just keeps you more open, and I think is a little bit better on power level as well.
I think so too. I always think it has haste as well. It does not. Next one. Wow, Sultai Charm. Lots of powerful stuff here. So this is black, green, blue. Instant, choose one. You can destroy a monocolored creature, which is excellent. You can destroy an artifact or enchantment, or you can draw 2 cards, then discard 1 card.
Yeah, it's kind of funny how the destroy target monocolor creature is not nearly as exciting as it would be in most sets, just because there's gold and there's morphs. When they're face down their colors, you can't kill them. But still, that destroy effect is still pretty important.
It is.
Yeah, and a lot of the monocolor morphs that turn them for 5, you can get a nice blowout on them when they actually go to pay the mana. It's not one of the stronger charms, and I wouldn't be first picking it even out of an average pack, I don't think. But a nice card to have. Keep in mind later in the draft.
All right, we've got wow. Okay, so we've got a mythic rare.
Okay.
And we've also got a foil rare. So we just got a stupid pack here. So our mythic is Ash Cloud Phoenix.
Oh, so the Heart Piercer actually gets beat.
Does it get beat by the Phoenix?
I think so.
It has to, right?
The Heart Piercer kind of functions very similarly in that it provides card advantage and in many ways tempo.
Yeah, but the Ash Cloud Phoenix is better creature, right? Just the same amount of mana, but a 4/1 flyer has to be better than a 2/3.
Right.
And then especially when it becomes a 2/2 and then can even get back into 4/1 flying territory. Yeah, that's insane. That's pretty funny. And we're passing a Heart Piercer. Awkward.
It's fine. I don't mind fighting for it. And the good thing about Khans is that you can actually share a color with your neighbor, and you actually expect to.
Yes, that is true.
And that's fine because a lot of times they'll just make that color their third color, even if they're getting cut out of it. And like, let's say they go into Teamer, right? They'll just play heavier blue and green and make red kind of their splash. And I think that's kind of the typical way that I've been playing Khans, is to try to maximize 2 of the colors, usually enemy colors, and make the third color minimized. And it just makes your deck more consistent, but you still have access to the powerful 3-color spells in the late game.
Right. All right, so you want to know what our foil rare is?
What is it?
So it doesn't compete with Ash Cloud Phoenix or Mardu Heart Piercer, but it's pretty sweet. It's Keru Lich Lord. So this is that 4/4 that we you and I are a little down on it, I think, on the set review, and I think appropriately so. It's 6 mana, so it's 3 in Sultai for a 4/4, and then at the beginning of your upkeep, you can pay 2 and a black to get a creature back from your yard at random. It gets flying, trample, and haste until end of turn, and if it goes anywhere else, it gets exiled, and it gets exiled in turn as well.
Yeah, I mean, this is the clan that can best take advantage of expensive finishers, and this is an okay one. I'm not going into Sultai because of Keru Lich Lord. I think it's merely a card you can pick up if you already are.
Yeah, like if I took Sultai Charm and wheeled that card, okay, sure. Right. Yep. But yeah, no way. No, for me, so just to recap, by the way, this pack got very good. We had, Smite the Monstrous is in here too, but there's a Treasure Cruise, which I like. There's the Mardu Horde Chief, which I think is excellent. And then the rest isn't great. Rakshasa's Secret, Mastodon, Alpine Grizzly, Pet, Dragon Scale Boon, Lurkers are all fine. But there was High Spire Mantis, Mardu Heart Piercer, and then the Phoenix as well as I think the top 3 options. And then I like Mardu Horde Chief next. And then Treasure Cruise and Smite the Monstrous are cards that I'd like. I don't think they compete with the cards we have here, though.
Yeah, and I think in any type of multicolor set, if you can take a monocolor card without giving up power, it's just going to be the best thing for your draft going forward because it keeps your options open. And we don't have to give up any power level for either the Heart Piercer or the Phoenix, but I'm going to go with the Phoenix.
Yeah, I'm on board with the Phoenix as well. All right, let's open up another one. That went so well.
Feeling pretty good about that pick.
Yeah, that was a sweet pack. All right, first card. Oh, I like this one. Crippling Chill.
Yeah. And I've seen people linking to their Quiet Contemplation decks and I think Crippling Chill is probably like the most sensible thing to trigger it with. You just get a second lockdown and you get another card that's going to dig you deeper. That's pretty cool.
I think that's good. Yeah, I think the card's just super solid. And for those who can't remember it, it's 2 and a blue, instant, tap target creature. It doesn't untap during its controller's next untap, and you get to draw a card. Anok Tracker, by the way. It's Anok.
That is which one?
Oh yeah. I was just talking about pronunciation wise. I got my pronunciation guide for the Pro Tour.
Oh,
Yeah. It is a 3/3 first strike morph. So it's four and a red to flip it up, 5 and a red to cast it, and it's a 3/3 with first strike.
honestly, this is not one of my favorite morphs, and I think this is like kind of a controversial opinion. I think I actually prefer the 5/2.
Oh,
The
interesting.
unmorphs for 4. I just don't think you actually get that big. 3/3 first strike doesn't get big enough to like battle with the other morphs when they turn theirs face up or whatever, and it falls off. Even if like, I mean, just people, you're not going to get anybody with Eyenog Trapper. People know that 5 mana is the mana where you don't block with your 2/2, right? So it's not going to just like randomly kill their stuff, I don't think. So
I see. So that shifts your focus to, well, then how much can I get in?
exactly. So if you just turn it up for damage, it's not that great because I still think it's eventually going to lose to things that actually cost 5 or 6 mana. It's going to lose to other expensive morphs, and I just think like the 5/2 creature like is more threatening. It plays better with Jeskai. It plays better with Ferocious. I just think it fits the set better, and I like the fact that it's falling on a number other than 5 where I have so much competition.
Interesting. I like that. Yeah, I think that's actually that last point you made is the one to focus on the most, right? Is morph 4 and a red versus morph 3 and a red.
Mm-hmm.
You just do so much other things at 5 that that four mana morph slot just becomes super important. Well, here's Feat of Resistance. You mentioned it a little bit ago. It's the 1 and a white instant. You get to put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control, and it gains protection from the color of your choice until end of turn.
I hope we didn't undersell it in the set review. I love Feat of Resistance. It's been so good for me. Just a huge fan. Honestly, if I had to redo it now, I'd put it in somewhere in the B range. I think it's just an unbelievable trick, especially with the +1/+1 synergy from Abzan. But even in an aggressive deck, it just ruins them when they make the block that is, you know, their 3/3 on your 2/2 or their 4/4 on your 3/3, and you Feat of Resistance, only 2 mana, you upgrade your creature permanently and kill their thing. It's like sometimes like better than Doomblade. It is so good a lot of the times. And there's one trick I have with Feat of Resistance when you're playing against morphs and you're let's say you're attacking your morph into their morph. You still have to pick a color, you know. So their creature while it's face down is colorless. But there are 5 morphs in the set that can turn face up without spending mana. So based on those, the 2 you need to think about are the Teamer Charger, because it's 3/1, and the Ruthless Ripper, because it has Death Touch. So you want to pick either green or black based on which you think is more likely to be in their deck, just so they can't turn it face up after you've picked your color and trade with your morph.
Very nice.
Yeah, it's something that it's like when you get in that scenario, you're like, what do I do? Do I just pick it random? No. There's 2, and you want to pick usually green or black.
That is awesome. Next is another morph. It's Woolly Loxodon, the biggest.
I like it, but I haven't really been flipping it that often. It seems like it always dies before I get to 7 mana, but that's fine. And when you do get to that stage where you just don't have anything else to do with your mana, it's pretty cool.
I just think it's like it just combats so well, and getting to 6 mana in this set hasn't been an issue. So I actually value it somewhat highly. Like it's not a tier 1 card. It's not one of those cards that you got to get your thing. But like any green deck, I'm really happy to have one. I really am. It's just it's amazing how with all these tricky gold things and all these, you know, like little niches and weird tricks and all that stuff, sometimes just being huge matters more than anything.
Well, I just realized it unmorphs for 6. I had 3 of them in my deck the other day. I would have flipped this thing face up so many more times if I knew that.
That's funny.
Yes. This card's great.
It's great. Yeah. Next is Bitter Revelation. An interesting card for sure. It's 3 and a black for a sorcery. Look at the top 4 cards of your library. Put 2 of them into your hand, the rest into your yard, and you lose 2 life.
The Bitter Revelation sets up such interesting play choices where sometimes you have to like decide if you want to go for the greed and like try to hit a land off of it so you can cast another huge delve spell with your remaining mana.
Oh yeah,
you know, it's
because it is a big one to chain delve spells together like that.
Yeah.
The question that I have about Bitter Revelation, because I think on its surface, it's pretty good. Like getting 4 cards deep is a big deal. And if you need to find your Murderous Cut or your Bomb or just some, you know, like you said, a land or whatever, Bitter Revelation is going to get you there. Losing the 2 life ranges from to doesn't matter at all. There's some matchups where they're just not punishing you, for that for forever, and the card advantage is going to far outweigh any type of tempo or life loss. But there's also matchups where, man, spending all of your mana on turn 4 and then 2 life is just going to spell death for you. And Mardu kind of lick their chops when you start to tap out for Bitter Revelation. And I think you need to keep it in mind. But the question I really have is just like, how good is card advantage in this format? We had like a thread going for some of the coverage guys, and I think it was JVL, Jacob Van Lunen. He was really high on card advantage and saying, look, I mean, we all love card advantage, but he thinks it's especially important here just because there's not that many ways to get it in the game itself, right? Like the morph thing, the morph rule or whatever you want to call it sort of prevents, savage blowouts, at least in the early stages. And people generally kind of are careful about morphs after that. They're not just slamming their 4/4s into the morph to block it just to see what happens. Like they know better, than to be reckless without a backup plan or whatever. And so I think his take was sort of like, if you can just rawly draw more cards than your opponent, then you can just sort of overtake them.
I'm not sure that I necessarily agree with that assessment, just based on my own limited experience playing the format so far. But this, to me, at least, it feels pretty like tempo heavy, this set, especially because Morph, you figure people aren't going to miss their drops. But I mean, I don't remember that many games where both players had played out their entire hands. I just that just happened like 10% of the time or less. It really feels like that the game is won or lost with, the decisions that you make in combat, and you can just fall behind on the board. And I don't know.
And that's a morph. That's a function of morph, right?
Yeah. And I think a lot of times, like if you're playing against Jeskai, like if you like keep their creatures off of the board, it doesn't really matter how many spells they have in their hand, right? Like their things just don't work anymore. And I think that's true, like for Mardu. Like if you keep them clean, their raid spells are just less powerful. And I don't feel like I'm playing a card advantage battle as much as I am in some sets. I can't agree with that assessment.
All right, that'll be interesting to see how that goes going forward. Next is Summit Prowler. He was going to be your boy, B. Wong.
Right.
It's you have shunned him, so he now lives in the mountains by himself.
Yeah, his home is in a 2-color set, I think.
Yeah, so 2 red for a 4/3.
Yeah, still, if you draft enough lands or your sealed deck has enough lands, you can get up to that 9 sources of red, a fair amount of the time. And if you do, it's a pretty good addition to your deck. But when you actually, a lot of times you end up down with maybe in 7 or 8
6,
range.
7, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If you're in the 6 or 7, you really want to look elsewhere. So I think that's what it comes down to. So Summit Prowler is a card that only makes the cut about half the time, just due to the mana of the set.
This next one has been impressive, I think. Kill Shot. It's the 2 and a white instant destroy target attacking creature. It's interesting because at first I thought this card actually wouldn't be that great. But then I realized that like what people are doing often is sinking a lot of mana into their big attackers at some point. And the cool part is that sometimes you have to make really important, like in a normal set for a kill shot, if somebody attacks you with something, you have to make a pretty important decision on whether to kill it or not, because they might follow up with something bigger. But a lot of times what happens in this set is they either play an Outlast creature that you can just watch them ticking it up. So you're like, well, I'm going to save my kill shot for that. Or, for when they finally attack. Or it's a morph. And they've got a couple of morphs out. And you just know that one of them is going to eat up 5 or 6 of their mana at some point, and then you can kill shot that. Because you can wait and just say, like, I'm not blocking. I'm going to take your 2 damage. Or you can even be like, I block. And now I'm going to make you flip this morph over. And they're like, sure, it's a 5/5 trample, like kill shot. And I think that it just plays really well in the format because they eventually have to come over the top with something. And it's usually a morph or an Outlast creature.
Yeah, it's so important to keep this card in mind. It's one of the defining cards of combat. And I think if you're paying enough attention, you'll sniff these kill shots out. And I think you got to be really careful about choosing to unmorph your creature during combat. A lot of times you might just be better off letting your things trade because the tempo loss of getting your thing kill shot can be pretty rough.
Yeah. Next is Rugged Highlands. That's the red-green dual land. So you gain a life and it enters battlefield tapped.
Yeah, just to reiterate, the enemy color dual lands are better pickups early in the draft than the allied color ones because they go in twice as many clans. So just if you're considering what you're going to take out of this pack, keep that in mind.
And this is an allied color, right?
Right.
So not as high. Sultai banner. You know, you and I were chatting about this earlier before we started recording, B. Wong. Thing that I realized after discussing it with the coverage guys, and I don't know why I didn't, this wasn't like something that was stamped in my head, but it is now, which is, you know, I think the banners are okay. Like I try not to play them, to be honest. Like I don't think they're good, but like it's hard to argue with what they do, right? They fix your mana, they ramp you up, and they even get you a card back if you really need it. There's really not a lot of downside to that. On the surface, you know, assuming that you have a deck that wants those things. But at the same time, the tempo hit is huge, and that's not the type of Magic I like to play. It doesn't usually let me just randomly tap 3 mana for nothing or whatever and just say go. But the thing that I didn't really stamp home at the time was just that they cost exactly how much a morph does. And every time on turn 3 and maybe even turn 4, I'm playing morphs. I'm not playing banners.
Yep. And morphs fill a similar role in that it's like, oh, I didn't draw the colors of mana I need. I can still do something, right? Whereas the banner is like, oh, okay, well, you cast this banner, and now you can cast those spells. But the morph, you know, it takes that role. You're not going to have stuff stuck in your hand. It just doesn't help you. Also, on the getting a morph in play and getting up to 5 mana, it doesn't help any part of that process more than a land would. So I only want banners if I'm ramping. And I like to, I think, play a little more low to the ground, get a little more early drops in my deck, and I like to play Khans like with tempo in mind, and I don't want to take a turn off to play a banner.
Me neither. The funny thing is that I think, and it's funny how often we come back to this, but it's all about morphs. Because now when I play a ramp deck normally, it's because I've got 5 and 6 and 7 drops in my deck that are going to be more powerful than what my opponent's doing. But with morphs, I just play them on turn 3, right? And like they keep me alive, or they attack and they affect the board at an earlier stage. And that gives me the time I need to get to the mana later. And then it's just built in. They're sitting there right now waiting for me to dump all my mana into them. So I don't have to take that risk. Normally, if you build a deck with a bunch of 5, 6, and 7s, your risk is that you're not going to get to this stage of the game where you get to resolve them. Therefore, you never get to like show the power of your deck, right? And that just doesn't happen here with morphs because you get to resolve them anyway.
Yeah, and to go back to the question I asked you during the set review, would this format be more defined by morph or by gold? And you said morph, and I think that's totally right.
Yeah, it's just coming more and more true every time I play.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times you can afford, you know, to wait a little bit on your third color of mana if you've built a, you know, heavy 2-color splashing a third color, as long as you have morphs to do, because that's always going to give you like a way to get in damage early and then something to do on turn 5 plus.
All right, let's take a look at our next one. Card I've only played once, and I want to play more with, I think, is Force Away, which sounds like a counterspell, but it's a bounce spell. It's 1 and a blue for an instant, return target creature to its owner's hand, and it's got Ferocious. You get to loot if you've got a creature with power 4 or greater, which is, I mean, they kind of, like, it's funny, you'd think I would be, like, super stoked on this card because I love bounce spells and I love looting, but I just haven't had a chance to really play with it much.
I like how you can use it on turn, you know, roughly 5 or 6 of the game when you can play your own creature, keep up Force Away mana, and that way you can punish anybody that goes for the huge unmorph and just get a huge shot of tempo, which is pretty important for Teamer or for Jeskai. I think maybe not as important for Sultai, but if you're playing one of those other colors that's just about getting in huge chunks of damage on your opponent, getting ahead in the board race like that is huge. And I think Force Away is pretty strong. That said, I haven't always main decked it, and I think it's the main reason for that is because blue. When I'm playing blue, it's frequently my support color, but if you are heavy blue, I would be quite happy to play a Force Away.
Yeah, I think I would too. I love the idea. It feels like in Theros, right, where you block something and they're like, sure, pay for monstrous, and then you bounce it, and now they can't even replay it that turn. It's like you block their morph, they unmorph it, you bounce it, and now they just can't even replay it, and you just strand a card in their hand and set them back so much. This is the card I want with my Alpine Grizzlies. I want to be able to like attack with my Grizzly or just bounce their guy and attack with and just keep that get ahead, stay ahead thing going.
Yeah, it's also kind of cool that you get to see what their morph is when it leaves play, so you have a good sense of what's going to be the next time they play it. And you don't just want to fire off your Force Aways willy-nilly. I think you definitely want to make them commit something additional mana or additional permanence onto it before you cast it.
Yeah, I think so too. Our first uncommon, Hordling Outburst.
Ooh, I think that been hearing a lot of cool stories about Hordling Outburst.
Yeah, this one's good. It's 1 red for a sorcery, and you get 3 1/1 red goblin creature tokens.
Yeah, this is so good with Trumpet Blast. I think it's totally an archetype. You get the Ponyback Brigades in there too. Like you can just get so many tokens in this set. And
there's also the 5-drop.
Yes, they get 3 warriors in white.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I've seen this deck in action. It's pretty cool.
I have too. In fact, I've played it, and it is incredible. I built out a board that was so wide, I had to like move my opponent's stuff out of the way, and start rearranging tokens because of those cards. And then Randy Bueller cast Dune Blast.
What a jerk.
My board got a little less wide.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, all of that said, because of the double red and the mana cost on Hordling Outburst, if you're not going, like that deep on tokens, it's a card you could cut from your deck just because it can be a little tricky to cast.
Yes. I mean, it looks like a 3-drop, but in most decks it won't be.
Right.
Next is Temur Charm. So we got another charm here. This is, of course, Temur, so green, blue, red, and you can have your creature you control get +1/+1 until end of turn, and it fights target creature you don't control.
Okay.
You can also counter target spell unless its controller pays 3 colorless mana. Mm-hmm. Or you can have creatures with power 3 or less not be able to block this turn.
I've seen Temur Charm relatively late in draft.
Yeah.
I don't think it
feels that great to me.
Yeah, I'm not that particularly excited about it. And the fact that it's a very, because it is 3 colors, right? A lot of people don't want it for that reason. I think this is a card that you might be able to table if there's something else in the pack that you're looking at for your Temur deck. I might take the chance on tabling the Temur Charm if you like the other card.
I would too. I just don't think anybody else really wants it. I think it's good. I mean, look, you can't have 3 abilities that are even halfway reasonable and have the card be bad. And these are all decent. Like, they're all pretty good. The countering target spell's pretty good, but leaving up literally 3 different colors of mana is pretty rough. But it's, approaching a hard counter at that point. The downside, of course, being that if people just read you for it and just decide to start dumping their mana into their morphs, then you can kind of get worked. Mm-hmm. But the +1/+1 in fight at instant speed can be a big blowout. And there will be times when the last ability, the creatures with power 3 or less can't block this turn, just ends the game on the spot. You just like, oh, what does this do again? Oh, right, you're dead. Right. And it's like, oh, okay. But I think for the most part, like, when you think about playing against decks with small creatures, with creatures with power less than, with 3 or less, you think about tokens and bears and those type of small things. And I think that the Temur deck is already kind of matched up well against those, just because they tend to play bigger things. And if you're still alive at that point, you're probably just crashing into their stupid little guys and not really caring about it, and would rather just keep it as a mana leak or whatever.
Yeah, Temur Charm is the charm that feels like it's only good if the game is already going well for you.
Yes.
Right?
Where even the removal spell says, well, you need a creature, and it's got to be either bigger or close to bigger than their guys.
Right. So it just has like the worst like play from behind potential of any of the charms, and that's why it's my least favorite.
Well, yeah, that's a really good way to put that. Despise.
Is that how you feel about it?
No, that's the next card. It's
okay.
Black sorcery. Target opponent reveals his or her hand. You choose a creature or planeswalker from it, and that player discards that card. So first things first, you get a big gold star if you nab a planeswalker with this in limited.
What a dream crushing.
Just get them. Like, discard Sarkin. Okay.
I think we pegged it in the set review. This is the card that you can play, but you don't have to.
Yep.
It's fine.
Ooh, we got a good rare again.
Okay.
1,000 Winds.
Oh, I've seen this in action.
Oh, have you? I haven't yet. This guy's a house though. So 4 blue for a 5/6 with flying, which both you and I were like done in. And you can also play it as a morph and turn it up for 5 blue. So an extra colorless mana over the mana cost, which is kind of interesting. But when you turn it face up, return all other tapped creatures to their owner's hand. So how does it actually play out? I still haven't seen it.
A lot of times you just turn it up on your turn before you attack to return all of their stuff that attacked you on their turn.
Okay,
And then,
so
and then,
one or
and then
two things or whatever.
Yeah, and then you get in with your 1,000 wins and the rest of your team. Make sure that you don't unmorph it while you are attacking, because
Yes.
it will bounce your other creatures, which is pretty bad. So this is not one of those ones that you morph up to win combat that often. Usually you want to do it before, but
Oh, that's interesting.
yeah,
Wow, because like if you attack with it, thinking that they won't block, and then they block your morph, and you really need to flip it up to kill their guy,
right.
to make your thing into a 5/6.
Yeah, you got to be careful about that.
Wow,
But
so I'm just never attacking with that. I'm going to put a little cage around it.
yeah, I mean, if it attacks alone, it's all right. But
Mhm.
usually you just want to fire it off. Also, you can kind of leave it up on their turn, leave the mana up on their turn to get them when they go for their own unmorph for their own combat trick or something like that. But usually you want to use it more proactively because it has 5 power, it has flying, it closes out the game real fast. I think it's actually one of the better rares in the set.
So we mentioned in the set review that you can't get people with it by flipping it up and then blocking because unless their creature has vigilance. But so are you saying that this card is great also, just like it's my turn, I have it face down, I play my 7th mana, I'm like, go. And they're like, attack with my 2 things. And you're just like, turn this face up, bounce them?
I mean,
or do you always wait to do it on your turn so that they can't recast?
you could do it either way, but usually if they're attacking you, they would have attacked you the previous turn too, so their things are already tapped.
So once you hit that mana, you just flip it up and you're good.
Yeah, I think you
Yeah, that
typically
makes
want to
sense.
use it a little more proactively because also you start hitting them for 5 right away.
Yeah, which is huge. In the air, no less. All right, so I've got Kill Shot, 1,000 Wins, Feat of Resistance, and then I also pulled a Hordling Outburst out of this pile as well.
What was the first uncommon we had? I thought we had a good one.
We had Despise, Teamer Charm, and Hordling Outburst,
Oh, nah.
which I pulled.
All right, well,
I'm taking 1,000 Wins, but
yeah, I'm definitely taking 1,000 Wins. This is another real strong card that's monocolor, going to keep you open. I think my second favorite pick is Feat of Resistance.
Is it really? Like, do you like it a lot better than Kill Shot?
I do.
Ooh, all right. That sums it up for me.
Yeah.
That's interesting because I'm still on Kill Shot, but if you say the Feat of Resistance is creeping up or even perhaps better than it, then that definitely raises my eyebrow.
It's been so good every time I've cast it, or just saving your creature from removal and making it an even better threat. Getting the 1/1 counters at instant speed is really, really good, obviously, with Obzon creatures. I don't know. I've just found it to be perfect. And 2 mana is a really nice spot.
It is.
Where you can, on turn 5, potentially cast it and play another morph or something like that. It just feels perfect for the set.
It's cool, too, that you can cast it on a morph and it gets to keep the counter.
Yeah. Even if you turn face up, still keeps the counter. Yeah.
Yeah, like if they go for debilitating injury or whatever, and they're like, and they guess correctly, and that was not the morph that you wanted to die, you can save it, and it even gets bigger later. All right, so why don't we take a look here, Brian, at the clans themselves, and just sort of give our take on what we've seen from each. So let's start with Obzon, and my early impressions are that it seems strong. I think it's panning out to be one of the better clans available. And I've seen 2 different types of builds so far, and I've seen them both be successful. One of them is kind of like a more assertive, curve, aggressive type deck that seems to be white-black based, and then the green is sort of, for some value, Obzon type stuff here and there, but it's a little more warrior-y and, like you could almost imagine it being a Mardu deck type thing with like Enoch Bondkins and those type of things coming down early. And then the other one that I've seen is much more of kind of what I thought it would be when I first saw Outlast, which is sort of hunker down, lots of toughness on the ground, shields up, pick things off with removal because, man, White and Black has some decent removal in this set, and then eventually take over the game through the Outlast mechanic. You kind of get enough blockers down where you can start tapping a couple of them per turn and not feeling like you're going to die. And then next thing you know, they're 6/7s or 3/5s or whatever, and they can start attacking.
Yeah, for that strategy, you need to make sure you have enough blockers in your deck, just to get to that point, right? So I really like Archer's Parapet.
Oh yeah, that thing's sweet.
The 0/5 for 2 mana. They can spend black mana to ping them. And I really like Kin Tree Invocation, the sorcery that's put an XX into play, where X is the greatest toughness among creatures you control. Only costs 2 mana, green and black. So especially if you have the Archer's Parapet, or you have the 0/4 Outlast creature, you can get this thing into play with absurd power and toughness early in the game and just get way ahead. Plays really well with Outlast creatures, which tend to have high toughness already as well. Those are my 2 sleepers, but I've been playing the Outlast deck a little bit more proactively, I think, and I've been looking for cards like the Boon and like the Feat of Resistance, which will allow me to get my +1/+1 counters while attacking.
Right.
And then I've been using the Trample one, and the Trample Outlast creature goes really well with, when you get big, you can force through a ton of damage on your opponent.
By the way, I found that card to be excellent. The 2/3 for 2 and a G.
Yeah, that whole cycle, all of those 2/3s for 3 that get bigger, like
the Abzan Falconer.
Yeah.
Those cards are good. The 2/3s for 3, I'm already sold.
Yes.
The way that they interact with morphs is excellent.
Mm-hmm.
And then those ones have such insane upside.
Yeah, and they fit that perfect sweet spot where you play them on turn 3 and your opponent doesn't have a good attack, and then on turn 4 you can play another morph and have the one mana to Outlast because they have the super cheap Outlast cost. Then you get up to 3/4, and frequently you don't need to put too many counters on it to have it become like a huge attacker. I like that. And then the Reach one, the Longshot Squad, is pretty cool because it doesn't even need a counter itself. You can start protecting yourself with using your other Outlast creatures. And I found that it's really important to one of the reasons I really like Feat of Resistance in the set is because your opponent will be looking to pick off your Lifelink Granter or your Reach Granter or your Trample Granter at instant speed to do something important. And if you can save it with your Feat of Resistance, it can totally crush their plans. That's why I think Feat of Resistance is so good in this deck and just such a good card overall. But I think the Mardu, you don't have to play a straight control Mardu. I think you can play, Abzan. I think you can play a more mid-rangey, not aggro, you're not just totally beat down, but I think you can get ahead of your opponent pretty early if you make a concerted effort too.
Yeah, I think you can too. And I think that that's going to be one of the ways. My gut tells me that this Abzan deck ends up being really what we consider a classic mid-range limited deck, a normal deck, if you will, where it's got a curve of creatures and removal with some powerful spells and some stuff to do in the late game. But that it approaches a little different, and I think that every version you have will be slanted over a little bit towards the more curvy. Calling it aggro, I don't know. I've seen some fairly aggressive starts, but assertive decks versus the other side of the coin, which I think are going to be those a little bit more slow down. Let's think this over for a while I put a bunch of counters on my guys.
Yeah, incremental growth is one of those cards that puts counters on your creatures that can turn the game from trying to stall at the board to LOL, in a heartbeat.
It certainly does. I've seen stupid stuff. All my dudes get lifelink and first strike, and by the way, they're huge attack.
Right.
I've seen that.
I got 17 power in play on turn 5. It's and my creatures all had trample. Good luck. Yes. Good luck, sir.
Yes. That's pretty nasty.
So we move on to
Temur. Let's move on to Temur. What are your thoughts on Temur been so far?
It's just about getting the most power and toughness into play as fast and as consistently as possible. I really think that's what Temur is. The Bear Companion, underrated a bit. It's just raw power and toughness. How much can you get in play? And it just mucks up the board for your opponent. There actually aren't that many evasion creatures in the set, I feel. And if you can just clog up the board, and then Temur actually can take advantage of that position really well. And I know, like I said, I don't really like Temur Charm that much, but it's great there. You can just close out the game. You just you can't block, you're dead. Icy Blast is just a fantastic card no matter what, but really at its best in Teamer because you're far more likely to have Ferocious. And just like the big chunks of damage you can deal with the Alpine Grizzly, with the Punch, or there's a whole bunch of like small combos it can do to just really just turn the game, in a heartbeat. So I think it's really about just efficiency and just getting, how much power can you get in play, as quickly as possible.
Yeah, my take was real similar to yours. It's just felt a lot more individual card dependent than the other ones have. I don't see a lot of hand holding between cards where they're like, you outlast while I block. It's just like, how big are you? All right, well, I'm about the same size. Let's both attack. Okay. And you really are just sort of looking at like raw power at each individual spot and trying to just overwhelm your opponent by, just playing stuff that's just way bigger than what they're doing at that stage in the game. It feels like the other decks can catch up eventually, but if you have a reasonable curve, your stuff's going to be a little bigger than theirs at every spot on the curve. And if you can sort of capitalize on that with some of the blue bounce spells, or maybe that rare that we talked about earlier, the Frost one, and Icy Blast or whatever it's called, and I think that like when you really break it down for Teamer, the Ferocious mechanic just isn't like this glue that makes the deck work in the same way that maybe Outlast or Delve might be for the other decks. Instead, it's just like a random powerful bonus that you get that kind of helps keep you on the path to victory.
My sleeper for the Teamer clan is Roar of Challenge.
Oh, yeah.
The all creatures must block target creature this turn. And if you have Ferocious, that creature is also indestructible.
Right.
You don't have to target a thing with 4 power to get that bonus, which is really, really cool with Arrow of the Wilds. That's my favorite target for
the Death Touch guy.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
so
God.
You can just wipe their board.
God.
And assuming that you had something else that had 4 power,
you get to kill 3 things.
You get to kill 3 things, and your Arrow of the Wilds gets to live.
That's insane.
It's really good. I think Arrow of the Wilds might just be one of the best cards in that deck because it comes down on turn 2. It's just a good attacker no matter what, or good attacker or blocker at any point in the game. And
I think that card is absolutely excellent.
Yeah, it seems bonkers in the set and goes towards your goal of getting board position as fast as possible.
Yeah. What about Jeskai? This is, for me, Jeskai is the big question mark still. I've drafted it once. I've played against it a couple of times. And honestly, I just cannot figure out exactly where it sits. Like, I know that it wants to be assertive. But the way that it's played out for me the best, and the people that played it against me the best, where I've thought, okay, there's something there, is they set up their board with a prowess creature or 2, and then kind of had like a couple of huge turns, and they just did a ton of damage to me. And I was like, wow, like I didn't see that coming really. But I have to say that the strategy felt very fragile.
The Jeskai in Khans of Tarkir it plays like the mid-2000s Phoenix Suns, where they lure you into a race.
Yeah,
right?
that's exactly what it is.
It's like, this is fun, this is a run, and then all of a sudden, oh, I take 18 damage? Wait, what happened?
Right, and you thought it was fine to attack because, hey, they were attacking you, and they only had 2/1s back to block anyway, so might as well send in your guy.
Right, but they're crippling chill, or just like flying crane technique, where it's just you can just steal these games. Frequently, Jeskai will seem to be behind on board. The creatures aren't that big naturally. Like something like Ifrit Weapon Master can turn up and do between itself and another creature like 7 damage basically. So like they have a lot of hidden sources of damage. I think the raid 5 damage spell is at its best in Jeskai. Which card is that?
Which one?
Arrow Storm.
Oh yeah, man, that card's been a performer for me, by the way.
Yeah, so I mean, like just cards like that where you can just go to the dome. So Jeskai is fragile. I think the best way to play against Jeskai is to just kill everything on sight.
Yeah, like I had that same feel. So like when I played it, I just remember praying, just like, don't kill my guy, don't kill my guy. Because I had like the 2/1 flying, the Jeskai Wind Scout or whatever, and it's got prowess, and I'm just like, don't kill it. Because I'm looking at my hand like, I can hit you for 5 next turn.
Yeah.
And then I can follow that up with another big hit, and I get you in range of this Jeskai charm or whatever, and happens to be in my hand. And then when I'm playing against it, I'm looking at it like, oh, it's turn 4. I play my land. I've got 4 mana, right? And I'm like, well, I can play either a morph, a 4-drop, or this stupid 2 mana debilitating injury on their 2/1 flyer. Well, my my normal mode of play would be to play the 4-drop. I want to develop my board out, and then I'll use my mana more efficiently later, where I'm like, I'll take 2 damage from that bird, or maybe 3, right? No big deal. But now my mentality has changed. And my mentality now is kill the bird. Just kill it. Kill anything that they have that could do anything. I mean, I've put debilitating injury on the Jeskai student, the 1/3. I think that's the student, and just to make it so that it won't do damage to me, because I feel like once I do that, if I were to like put myself in their shoes and think about all the cards that they're running, I make so many more of the cards in their hand bad, right? Like their crippling chill now just kind of doesn't do much. Right. Their random, Jeskai, whatever, charms and all that kind of stuff just don't do that much. They're, they play in equipment and they're like, oh, I get triggers, and it just takes all of that stuff off the table. And I feel like even though I'm either getting a 1-for-1 or maybe even not even a full 1-for-1, like in the case of that student, I feel like I'm still getting way ahead by making like a bad tempo play that I wouldn't normally make. It's weird.
Yeah, and their decks tend to be more creature light. So, you don't necessarily have to just save your removal for the one thing that matters, right? I think you can actually get a lot of advantage by just trying to kill it, like basically everything on site. So yeah, so Jeskai it's about stealing games. It's about active trees and crippling chill. Cards like that, they can just force through the damage and swing the race at the last second.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to end up being the best clan power wise, but it's got my respect right now. I'm just like, I do not want to lose to this thing. Also, another reasoning behind what I was talking about before is like Feat of Resistance, like you said. Like, you let them untap, and now all of a sudden you can be like, I'll use my kill shot on your guy. And they're like, give it pro white, you take an extra damage, and then you take another extra damage. You just took 4. It's like, what just happened? And the next turn, they're hitting you for 3. Like, just kill the bird. Kill it.
Yep. I think Jeskai is a really cool deck for Canyon Lurkers. The 5/2. Because they're about taking huge chunks out of your life total.
Yeah, and Lava Axe you.
Yeah, and I do think the Quiet Contemplation Goblin Slide deck could be a thing. And I've heard some positive results on that. Maybe it's just the people that went 0-3 didn't report in.
Yeah, I've tried the Goblin Slide and was unimpressed. But I've played against Quiet Contemplation, and I thought that pulled its weight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and I obviously I don't know yet what the real quality build looks like for those yet. So this was just people trying it out in the early stages. So it could definitely be there.
Yeah, and that's one of the great things about cons is we got so many build around me on commons, and eventually you're going to try them all.
Right. Mardu is next.
Mardu is my favorite so far.
The beats.
Yeah, I'm big fan, and I think you want to play it two ways. So I mentioned before that I think when you play a clan, it's frequently most consistent to pick 2 of the colors and make the third one kind of a splash. And I think it's especially true in Mardu because if you're aggressive, you need to come out fast, and having your 2-drops more consistently on turn 2 is really important. So I think you want to be like red white or black white and just be splashing the third color. So if you're red white, you can get in your your Valley Dasher, your War Name Aspirant, whatever cool cards you can play on turn 2 just to get going much faster, Leaping Master, etc. But if you're black white, then you're more into the Chief of the Scale, and the other one, whatever, the Chief of the Edge, right? And it's about kind of like the more warrior-y way, and then you make the red the splash. And I think you can play tokens with either half. Actually, it's kind of interesting like that, but I think it's the clan that's most important to be a little more conservative with your mana, just so you can be faster.
Yeah, I think that I was predicting early when we got the set that Mardu would be the check and balance. Hey, I'm going to play 5 color, and Mardu says, nope, you're not gonna. Yeah. Gives you the Dikembe Mutombo finger wave and just bang, kills you. And so far, it seems to have played that role. The way that I've seen it play out is straight up aggressive. It's got the burn spells. It's got the arrow storm to finish you off, which, by the way, has really impressed me. But then the main thing that I've seen is the tokens. The token strategy really is a thing. The Trumpet Blast plan is an absolute reality. It's very tough to interact with. The only 2 cards that I can think of that really punish it are the 2 in a red does 1 to all your opponent's creatures. Mm-hmm. And then if you have ferocious, they can't block or whatever. And then the other one is the 3 black green, -2/-2 to everything, and you gain a life for each thing that dies.
Yeah, like Death Frenzy or
Your
something.
Death Frenzy, yeah. And I got to learn these names. But yeah, and and those are good. Like those do a nice job, but they're pretty narrow. And we're yet to be seen what kind of main deck play Death Frenzy gets, and I don't think you're going to see the other one played in the main really at all. So and especially because of that card we mentioned earlier that makes the 3 warriors, that's instant speed.
Yep.
Like they can have like a decent curve, beat you down, and then you kind of play like 2 or 3 creatures, and you're like, okay, I'm more stable now, and they're just like end step, make 3 guys attack you with everything. Maybe they play an ankle shanker, or maybe they just attack with everything and have all their mana up, and you're just like, welp, and like you're gonna die. Like I got bad news for you, but and especially if you get a little greedy and just I'll attack with this. They're like, sure, take it. And then they flash in 3 more bodies that represents 9 damage that you weren't planning for, and then you die.
Yeah. So I played it tokens. I played it not tokens.
Which is better?
I think it works either way. I honestly don't think you have to be committed. I do think there are enough just good attacking creatures at 2, 3, and 4, especially if you get a couple of the really strong raid ones that you can just kind of play straight up. And my sleeper for Mardu is a card that has Delve, Sultai Scavenger. You'd think, I want that in Sultai, but I actually think I prefer it in Mardu because it's a really good finisher for the deck to close out the last few points of damage. But also, when you're playing aggro, your opponents are just looking to trade off creatures as often and as early as possible, which means you can frequently just play like a Sultai Scavenger like on turn 4, which is pretty darn good. And there aren't actually that many flyers or creatures with reach, and I think it can really deal a ton of damage to your opponent.
Yeah. What about Sultai?
Sultai has been awesome for me, and I haven't like delved at all, basically.
Have you boarded the Treasure Cruise yet?
I have unfortunately not.
Wow.
But I just feel like it just feels like 3 really strong colors, and this is like the card advantage clan, right?
It is absolutely the value clan. Like I picked it in my pre-release, and well, I tried to draft it twice. I've drafted it once for sure, and then I tried to draft it a second time and got shipped a bunch of Mardu cards. And even though my first 3 picks were all like heavy delve, I jump ship. But yeah, like wow, you can just draw so many cards and play so many things with delve. Like I have to say, like as far as me personally goes, like this is all I ever want to do forever. Like it lets me use up my mana in an efficient way, which I love doing. And it lets me draw cards, and I love doing that. And I'm just like so in on Sultai. I just feel like everybody that I know wants to play it like that too. So I have to be careful not to, put myself in a corner, but it is so sweet.
Yeah, I've seen that the All-In Delve. I saw the All-In Delve deck itself because it was drawing too many cards, milling too many cards. It's a little awkward. I'm just glad that you don't have to play it that way, which means that you might get value from just having people in those colors that are passing you like just the conventionally good things. I like that. I think that I've been preferring green, black to be my core and blue to be the splash.
What's the reasoning there?
I think the green and black just provide better early creatures, and that helps you stabilize the game, which allows your card advantage engine to take over. And really, like if you win the early game with Sultai, you're probably just going to win the game.
Yes, I agree. Yeah, because you have the ability to find good stuff through card draw or card selection. You get discounts on it so that you can deploy multiple threats in one turn, or maybe deploy a threat and unmorph a creature, which will start to outpace what your opponent's doing in the late game. And often you'll find yourself with 3 or 4, maybe even 5 cards in your hand while your opponent has 1 or 2, and you're doing more on the board. It's really tough to beat that.
Yes. I had Sidisi. I guess we can't all be so lucky, but
jeez,
that's
pretty lucky.
That's fantastic. You have access to some of the best bombs. You have access to Sagu Mauler.
Yeah,
Sagu Mauler might end up as the ultimate grown test in the set.
It could be, because that card is nearly unbeatable.
Yeah, you just think, I don't have the answer in hand, and there's basically almost nothing you can top deck going forward either.
The question is just if you have like a huge blocker or a ton of blockers.
Yeah. Oh man, what a blowout! And Sultai Soothsayer, it's just the perfect card for the deck because it
I
provides you
know.
a
It's
sweet
so good.
blocker, and it's gonna find you the thing you need. Frequently, the thing you're getting is a delve spell that you can cast for 1 mana at that point. What a card!
Yeah, that card's sweet. All right, before we move on to the announcement I alluded to earlier, I did want to ask you about um, two other archetypes that I'm expecting to make an appearance at some point, which are two color decks, maybe white black, that kind of thing. Have you seen those?
I have not seen a 100% two color deck, but I've seen a deck that was only splashing like a card or two.
So like it resembled a normal set draft deck where it was like, oh, you're white black and you've got a little bit of red.
Right, but I think at that point they had enough two color lands that the third color was like virtually free, right? So they didn't actually have to give up anything as far as color consistency goes. But I haven't seen anybody explicitly draft for two colors, and I think that could prove to be a thing. That way, you don't have to even bother taking any of the lands with high picks, and that would probably be a red-based deck, I would guess, and you'd be using the Valley Dashers and just try to beat down as fast as possible.
Okay. Now, the other thing that I've been keeping my eye out for, though, of course, are 5-color decks. And I've actually drafted a couple of these myself. And I am here to tell you that it's a thing. You can absolutely do it. The power level's there. I had talked to John Laux a little bit about how he would approach this and kind of mimicked what he would do, which was make it a morph deck. Make it so that you've got 7, 8, 9 morphs, and you're just always playing a morph on turn 3. You play 18 lands, you play all the color fixing you can. You try to, like double cards with double mana symbols are definitely poison. Like you try to stay away from those. But having like 3 mana symbols in 3 different colors isn't that big of a deal, especially if it's on a morph cost. And the way this generally works is you play morphs and anything else you can in the early game, and you aggressively trade them off or just use them as deterrents from attacking or whatever. And then in the meantime, you're building up your mana base and your life total, as it turns out. I mean, the last 5-color deck I drafted had 9 of the dual lands that give you a life. I was at like 24, 23 life pretty consistently. And then I also had 3 actual fetch lands too, which is kind of insane. But anyway, and then what happens is if you manage to scrape your way through that early section of the game, you've used that time that you've been given to build up your mana so that you can now start unmorphing. And it's crazy because they can't play around anything. They're just like, I have no idea what you have under there, but I can't really, I can't figure it out. There's just no way for me to figure it out like game 1. And you start flipping over 5/5 trample, 3/4 flying that loots when it hits. And all of a sudden their hopes just start going down further and further. I mean, you've got 4 morphs out, and you can flip any one of them, and they could be literally any morph in the set. Like it's just very, very tough for your opponent to deal with that. Now, the thing to keep in mind, though, of course, is that you don't always get to that point of the game. You're playing all these tap lands. You're not really doing a lot in the early game. Sometimes just playing a morph on turn 3 isn't enough. And if they go, especially 1-drop, but if they go like 2-drop, 3-drop, 4-drop, removal spell, trick, like you can be way too far behind to recover. So there is a cost to doing this. But I can see, and I've seen, and I've done it myself, that there is a sequence that works for these decks, and you can definitely get the tools that you need to make it work.
Would you play a Trail of Mystery in that deck?
I did.
Was it good?
It sucked. I hated it.
That's not the answer
I did not want to play it. I had 9 morphs and all the colors, and I had basics from everything because of those fetch lands. And I'm like, well, how am I not going to play Trail of Mystery? I have to try it at least, right? And look, I mean, for the first, I have one, backstab moment with the card where I drew it literally after I had deployed the last morph from my hand. I'm just like, this is just, I just wanted to tear it up. I'm just like, you're so dumb, Trail of Mystery. But even then, I just found myself getting in spots where play Trail of Mystery and start to sweat a little bit because I'm getting beaten down. And I couldn't play the tap land I needed to that turn or something in between. And then get a morph down and get a little value out of it. Okay, now I get to get a card back in my hand. I'm sure it's a basic, but still it matters and it's fixing my mana. So now I'm like, okay, I've got that card back and I'm fixing and things are starting to improve a little bit here. And then maybe you hit a little dry patch where you just don't play a morph and you're just staring at that Trail of Mystery like, why do I need you? I have 12 mana fixing lands in this deck. Like, sure, peeling out a land every once in a while is okay. And sure, getting the +2/+2 when you unmorph is pretty good. Like, it adds up, right? But the reality is I didn't feel like I needed it. Like, I had the mana fixing I needed, and so I didn't need to spend a whole card on it. And on top of it, when I started flipping my morphs over, who cares? Like, they're huge and scary and ridiculous anyway, because I've picked all the morphs that are huge, scary, and ridiculous. So for me, I'm kind of out on that card. I did talk to Nate Price from the coverage team. Well, he used to be on the coverage team. Now he works down at Wizards. And he said that he had it in, I think, their league deck, which is sealed, and he was quite impressed by it. So, maybe it's a question of sealed versus draft, but I wasn't impressed by it.
I also like the thing about the 5-color deck is that you open Dune Blast in pack 3. All right, I'm just going to play Dune Blast or Bear's Companion or Butcher of the Horde or who knows what.
Yeah, and you also get to take those like third or fourth pick because, look, by the time it's pack 3, if I'm heavy, Jeskai and I open Dune Blast, I'm not moving in. Right. And you pass it to the next guy, and he's like, well, I'm in Mardu, and while I could technically splash this card, I don't really want to play a 7-drop in my beatdown deck, so shrug, ship it along. Now if you're the next one in line, you're just like, bang, like windmill it. You can't wait to get that card into your deck. But since a lot of the bombs are full-on, clan-based 3-color bombs, they go way later than you'd think because look, even like a weak-hearted person, who's just like, the person that would see some dragon in core set in pack 3 that's just not in their colors and just be like, I have to take it. They can't convince themselves to splash for 3 or 2 other colors. Mm-hmm. And even they'll pass it. So yeah, it's crazy because anything you open and you even are drawing a lot more live than normal to get past a bomb.
I'm so happy the 5-color morph deck was innovated by our Johnny Laux. And I do have the inside information confirming that the typical John Laux opening was turn 4, 24 life, play a morph.
So yeah, I was definitely Lauxing it up then at that draft. It was fun to play too. Incidentally, we did 2 drafts and Randy Bueller drafted a 5-color deck as well. That was the one where he actually had Dune Blast. And yeah, I mean, like, it was like I said, like he's playing a bunch of morphs and like he flips over some big dumb morph, the 4/5 blue morph, but then he's like Ponyback Brigade, which you wouldn't normally think of in like a non-aggressive or non-token deck, but that's just raw power. Like he didn't care. He's just like, sure, make a bunch of tokens. It's 5 power and toughness spread out. Like I can chump block. It's flexible. It's still a morph. So, he was just able to put anything in there. I had the same idea as him. And he's like, do you want to know how many rares I had? I'm like, how many? He's like 6 or something. It was 5 or 6. Like he just played all of his rares. Mm-hmm. So yeah.
Just some other basic stuff. Player draw, 17 lands, 18 lands. Do you have any feel for those things yet?
Yes. I was on the play every time. And I played 18 lands in both of my decks. I have played 17 as well in a more in a deck that was a little more assertive and a little more sort of simple. But like in the decks I drafted, I'm just like, I want 18 lands because if I don't hit the morph on turn 3, like that's already not amazing. Right? Like that's already not exactly a huge play, but if you don't make that play, at least you're dead. Like there's decks that will just destroy you. So I've been on 18 lands the whole time too.
And I found that most hands that stay on 3 lands for a couple turns are also losers. And I want to hit my first 5.
Yeah, so for sure.
I've played 18 lands every single time and I have not regretted it once. No. I think
and with the tap lands, you need a little more flexibility. Like, you got to be able to follow up. And then, yeah, like you said, hitting 5 is important because let's say you do have to take a turn off and get your morph down on turn 4. Well, you better get it flipped up on turn 5. Like, again, there's just, or play a 5-drop because, yeah, it just gets too tough. And that's why I've been on the play. It's funny because if I thought I could get away with it, I would be on the draw in a heartbeat, right? Like, because it gives me more chances to get my mana and to hit my mana as well. So, like, not only find the colors, but also hit my land drops. But I don't feel like if my first relevant play is turn 3 on the draw, forget it. Like, I'm not taking that risk. So I've been on the play with 18.
Yeah, another thing I said about before, I feel like because of Morph, you have stuff to do. Like, even if you don't have a spell in your hand, there's still so much stuff you can do. And that's why I don't find the extra card in your hand is as important. So I like play first, 18 lands in sealed or draft.
Yeah, I'm the same.
All right.
Good. All right, B, it is time, my friend. You've got a bit of an announcement for us. So I'm just going to pass it over to you.
So I am going to take a bit of a backseat on the show and not going to be your recurring weekly co-host. I've decided to reprioritize my life a little bit. And, I took kind of like a personal inventory. And I kind of found that I was probably spending way too much time and energy on it. And I really enjoy doing the show, but it's just been super consuming. And I feel like it's kind of prevented me from trying to just take on other challenges and just other things that I kind of want to do. I want to play more Magic, etc. And I feel like taking that back seat will allow me to do that.
Super sad about it, man.
I know I'm sad too, but on the other hand, I was thinking of all the other really exciting things that I was looking forward to doing on my Thursday and Wednesday nights, and there are a lot of them.
Yeah, and from my perspective, of course, it's a double-edged sword for me, right? Like from the show side, I'm super sad. Like I loved having you as a co-host. I love where the show went when you were on it. And and of course the listeners, I know you're probably going to be in a little bit of shock about it, but I'm in the same boat as you guys. It's just like, wow, like where do we go from here? And I'll talk about that in a bit. But on a personal note as well, though, it's just I like working with you, right? Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I consider you a friend, and I want my friend to be happy, right? And if you need to branch out and do other things and get a little bit, get your time back and get, some things prioritized for yourself, of course, I'm going to support you in that and wish you the best with, keeping that together. A few things to cover as far as your role with the show goes. Mm-hmm. You've offered to say, look, I want to come back on sometimes. You've offered, this is a little bit more for me than for others, but I'll just tell a quick thing. So one thing that people may or may not know, they probably do, but is that, we've had Ryan Spain, John Laux, Brian Wong, and as the co-hosts. And, running the podcast is, from my end is a mass. I mean, I wouldn't call it a full-time job. Like it's not literally 40 hours a week like I used to put in at the office, but it's a lot. Like it's decisions constantly that I have to make to guide the ship about, where do we go from here? What's the next step? Is this the right move? Because, I know the show is important to you listeners. And of course it's important to me on many levels. And what that means is I need help, right? Like I need to be able to bounce ideas off people and get opinions. And, so there's this sort of inner circle of people from LR, and it's Ryan, John, and Brian. And then these are my guys, and these are the people that I reach out to when I get stuck or when I say, do you think the listeners would like this or this better? Or this business decision I have to make about, back end stuff or whatever for maybe the Patreon, for the Kickstarter, for, I've got a bunch of other cool stuff that I'm going to be talking about when they're ready, merchandise stuff, things like that. And it's like, there's so many decision points along the way. And I'm a perfectionist when it comes to that stuff. I like doing things right and I want to get it right. And Brian is part of that inner circle and will remain in that, which means that your fingerprint, for lack of a better term, is going to be on the show still, Brian. Like I'm still going to be asking you for questions. You're still going to be, in the loop. And I think that, that's a way that a lot of people don't see. Right. Like, mm-hmm. I ask you questions like that all the time as it stands. And I also loop in Ryan and John sometimes as well. But I don't know that they see that part of it, that there's actually, there's some team effort kind of going on behind the scenes. And so, even if you're not on the show on a week to week basis, you're still going to have an influence on it.
Yeah, and unlike Ryan and John, I'm not going to Wizards of the Coast. I'm not going to have some, right. corporate team controlling me. So I can, come on probably like once a set is what I was thinking of, because I'm sure I'm going to have stuff that I'm dying to talk about.
Yeah.
Eventually it's going to boil over and I'm going to, shoot Marshall a message, or depending on how things shake out and how he wants to use me. But I was thinking about once a set would be appropriate.
Yeah. That sounds great.
And we'll figure out how the best way to do that is.
You know what I mean, we're just spitballing here, mm-hmm. no promises, but I think it would be sweet to have you on for this show, the one that we just did today.
Right. I mean, I think
this is one of your best strengths is getting the initial read.
For sure. I would love to come on after I've had like a week or two on Magic Online when I've ground my 20 drafts.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm really sharp at the start of a format, no doubt about it.
So yeah,
So
maybe this one or a week or two in,
yeah.
where maybe me and whoever ends up being the co-host can kind of give our impressions and kind of get what we think, and then we can bring you on to show it, to sort of be the reckoner, just like, well, Brian agreed, or he saw this and we didn't, and I think that would be fun to sort of compare notes, with you at that point too.
Yeah, I know people at home are probably freaking out, or at least some of them are, but the show has been here twice before, and I would say that it's come out for the better each time. And not that John was better than Ryan or I'm better than John, but because you have the cumulative like strength and innovation of each co-host, I think the show can continue to improve. And hopefully like we'll have new people bringing their new ideas to the show, and it will be even better. I have no doubts about that.
Yeah. So let me talk about that for a minute. So this was something that kind of came to Brian a little suddenly,
Yes.
and we were kind of at a turning point, and he, made his decision. And like I said, I'm fully supportive of him. But from my perspective, it does put me in a spot where I'm like, okay, what am I going to do? Right. And I've been here before, like Brian said, and I feel like even though I don't actually know what I'm going to do right now, I have figured it out before, and I'll do it again. And the one thing I want to say is that it's going to be a team effort with me and honestly with Brian and John and Ryan and with you, the listener. I'm going to need your support and your help to figure out, what direction to take the show. I've laid the groundwork here for what I want the show to be, and I've never wavered from that. Ryan and I started it out in 5 years ago, and I have not change the base framework of the show, which is we want to get you better at Magic. And when I make decisions around the show comes first, meaning it's all about putting out a quality product, and all the other stuff will work itself out. That's always been my philosophy with this podcast, and I'm not going to break from that. Even though we've had Kickstarter and now Patreon and all this stuff surrounding it, stickers and pins and cards and all this stuff that's just, it can muddle everything up. I've just stayed true to the original mantra, which is just like make the content good and the rest will sort itself out. And that's my goal when I'm going to be looking for a new co-host. Now, the way I've done it before and the way I'll likely do it again this time is we'll be in a little bit of a in-between stage for the next few weeks, maybe even months, who knows, where I'm going to be bringing on a slew of different people. Calling it a tryout, I think, is not the right way to go about it. This isn't putting somebody up on stage like on The Voice or whatever and being like, you're not good enough, maybe next time, right? This is more like you're a guest co-host and we're going to hang out and we're going to do the show and we're going to put out the best show we can. And then I'll bring on another guest co-host. And then eventually something's going to stick. And the listeners will know and I'll know, just like when you came on, Brian, and I just said, when we were done with our first show, I said to you, dude, that was great. Like you were planning on coming on for a show. And I just said, that was exactly what I want. That clicked. You were good. We had good chemistry. Like everything was good. And you agreed to come back again. And, the next show after that, I just said, dude, like that was good. Like this is a thing. And, at that point I offered you the thing. And, I remember you being a little reluctant about it, but the key here, right, was that it stuck and it worked. And the people on Twitter and via email were like, that guy. We want that guy, and it just clicked. And so that's what I'm going to be looking for again as we move forward. And I don't really know. I really don't know who it's going to be or how it's going to work. In the near future, the plan is this. I'm going to the Pro Tour to do coverage next week. It's in Hawaii. And so I'm going to be over there. I'm going a couple of days early just to check out Hawaii a little bit. But then I'm going to be in full work mode. So the most likely outcome, and I hate doing this, but I think the most likely and most reasonable outcome is that I take next week off, because scrambling to find somebody I think it's like 6 hours away, time zones away from where we're at or something, just feels like it adds. I think the show would probably just end up suffering anyway if I just like randomly found somebody and then tried to sync up Skype stuff from some hotel. And like, I just feel like it would probably be best to just sort of regroup and kind of, get our bearings and then come back the next week with somebody solid. Now, there is a chance that maybe if BDM's out there early or somebody, somebody from coverage or a pro that I bump into and I just go, hey, do you want to sit down for a couple hours and do a show? And they're like, sure. And I'm like, yeah, let's do it. If that works out, I'm not going to say no. But I think that that what I'm going to say is that probably there won't be a show next week, but we'll be back the week after, and I'm going to hit the ground running, and I'm going to do everything I can to bring you the best possible show like I always have. And I will do everything I can to find somebody who understands our ethos, here on LR, and will carry the tradition that Brian did and John did and Ryan has as well.
Yeah, someone who is as passionate as we were, I think is the most important thing.
I think you're right.
I just want to go through my reasoning real quick. I also don't want to sound flip, but it's like a miracle that I made it this far. I know most of my friends were shocked when I agreed to stay on and do the show more than once. And I think just the reason that I think the reason that it worked, but also the reason that I need to step away now is that I can't put something like this second. Like for me, it always has to be like, it has to be as good as I can possibly make it, right? And I just think about it so much, and I care about it so much, and at some point it starts to eat away at other aspects of my life that I should probably be prioritizing a little bit higher.
Yeah, I mean that's one of your biggest strengths, and by over time it becomes one of your weaknesses, right? Is this that like you get so into it that at some point you have to get out of it.
Yeah. And that's the thing for me is I can't just dial back, and I can't just be like, well, I'll just carve aside like a little bit of time on Thursday and do the show, because I would be so frustrated with myself, whenever I forget to say something or I forget to make a point. And like for me, even if the show was 90% as good as I think we've made it, I just couldn't live with that. Like that's just not my style. And And I think you're the same way. And just like,
I am. It's been a huge challenge for me, because when we first started the podcast, I set down a set of like I said, like guidelines, or sort of calling them morals is a little high, but you know what I mean? Like what I wanted it to be. And I've stuck to that. And that was good. Then when I quit my job, things changed a lot. And I started doing a lot more background stuff and diving into the sort of the business end of these things with the Kickstarter and the Patreon, and doing stuff like getting the sleeves and the deck boxes and that kind of stuff. And now I've got pins, and I've got some other stuff coming along the way too, to because people wanted them, like I thought this would be a cool thing, and it makes sense. So I'll do that. But holy smokes, you can just get buried so quickly. I spend so much just raw time on the podcast. Now, the good news is I quit my job so I could do that, right? So like it's not time that I don't have. It's just that if I don't seek balance with it occasionally, I become non-functional on some levels, right? Where all I'm doing is like I wake up and I go to my computer and I start doing stuff for the show. And it's just like, dude, if you don't enjoy it, right? Yeah. Like if I stop liking it, then all I'm doing is hurting the show itself, right? So I've been able to put sort of mechanisms in place where I can pull myself back a little bit, balance things out, and get refocused on the actual show itself. The funny part is that I'm similar to you in the sense that I have to do that. But the cool part is I found that I have that ability, but it's this cycle. It's like I go down this spiral, until I start getting really stressed out and just like feeling like every decision matters, a ton, and, all these things. And then I'll be like, dude, easy, like easy. This is supposed to be fun. Like you're doing this because you want to do it. Yes, you have to try to, do this like monetization and all this. You have to think of these things in terms that you never thought you would, like, well, what is my brand like? And I just I don't like any of that stuff. Right. But I have to, turn myself down from 10 to 6, and then it'll eventually creep back up to 10, and then I have to do it again. But it's just been part of the deal about, basically what it equates to is just running a small business, and if you want to have a successful one, you got to be able to roll with punches and do stuff like this. And that's the plan. Yeah.
Fortunately, you've been here before. I think we all should be, jump back off from the ledge and be confident that we're in good hands here. And I'm going to be excited to return to being a listener of the show. And, all the time I'm going to be like, dang it, why didn't they say this or why didn't they say that? But I had the exact same experience when I was listening to my own self-talk. So it's that's just how podcasts work. Is you get one shot to lay it down, and you're gonna miss a thing or two. But
Yep.
I'm super excited to be on the other end of the microphone, I guess, as they say.
All right. Well, Brian, of course, I mean, I have to say thank you, right, for the time that you did put in, and for helping elevate the show to where it's at now. I think that you were just one fantastic co-host on every level. You work super hard. You brought your A game every single night. You were funny. Some of the sign-offs you did were just, just like you taking your shame and just sacrificing it in front of the crowd.
Or yours.
And mine sometimes too. And I'm not thanking you for that. But yeah, that was just great. Also, I have one other question for you.
Okay.
Is this you giving up in the sign-off battle between you and John? Is this you saying he's better at it than you and you can't hang, or?
Oh, no, I don't want to embarrass.
Is that what this is?
No, honestly, the sign-offs play as a non-zero fraction of this, because like every like free moment where I'm, walking to the grocery store or, checking my email, in the back of my mind, it's always, oh man, what am I doing this week on the sign-off? And, the timing with John coming back has nothing to do with it, though. I think the sign-off compilation was one of many things, in addition to the con set review, that just it made me really proud of the work that we've done. And I just thought, I can step away feeling like I've left the show better than I found it. And for me, that was very important.
I could not agree more, and I think you absolutely have done that. Okay, well, why don't we sign off here? And remember, this isn't Brian's last time on the show. It's just his last time on the show for a while. But we'll figure out a way to work him back into a regular gig on the show. Maybe you can be like a Judge Joe Bono type figure, just bringing us different information. Mm-hmm. That would be super awesome. Brian, thanks again, man, for all the great times and for helping me make the show what it is today. You are awesome.
Well, thank you. It was a great opportunity, and I learned so much, which was one of my main reasons for taking it on. I just wanted to see, challenge myself. Can I do this? How can we make it better? And it was a really fun process.
I know the listeners will miss you.
Yeah, I'll miss them as well. Yep. But I'll be around. I don't be a stranger.
All right. So if you would like to maybe say thanks to Brian Wong for all of the awesome information that he has imparted on us and for making us better Magic players every week, you can do so. It's real easy. At Brian_LR is where you can find him on Twitter, and let him know. You guys really he's really brought the heat for us, and it would mean a lot to me for you guys to let him know. Like I said, probably no LR next week. It's possible, but probably not. And then we're going to hit the ground running, and you guys know me, I try to be transparent with you as much as I can. So I'm going to be telling you what's going on with co-host searches and what's happening with that. And we'll figure it out together. Like Brian said, we've done it before, and we're going to do it again. And we're going to keep bringing you the value every week, for as long as you'll allow it. You can find me on Twitter, of course, Marshall_LR, for any email concerns or anything like that. Go ahead and fire them off to me. At lr@lrcast.com. Brian's still going to have access to the email, though he won't have to answer them anymore, which is going to be another big time sink save for him. And but John and Ryan are still there, and of course I'm there, and I'll be answering emails there. So lr@lrcast.com. And for everything limited resources related, including the new podcast that we mentioned before, and places to find Brian for all of his stuff, you can find him on lrcast.com. Brian, thanks again, man. And listeners, thanks for hanging with me. We'll see you guys either next week or the week after that.
Well, I apologize in advance because this is long and not very funny, but I wanted to say something to the listeners. So here we go. When I joined the show on episode 184, I honestly thought that would be the only episode I would ever record. I wanted to bring the highest impact topic that I could for that one episode, so I picked card evaluation. Since then, Marshall and I have talked through countless subjects. I really feel like you guys have access to about 90% of what I know. I've dumped my entire brain onto this podcast, and I'm going to dump as much of the remaining 10% as I can into the sign-off. Play more lands. Stop devoting so much mental energy to how you could have gotten luckier and start devoting more mental energy into identifying your mistakes. There is no substitute for practice. Seek out the highest competition you can find and play against them as often as they will let you. Are you tired of using a die roll to decide who goes first? Fan out your sideboard a random stack of Magic cards face down, pick a topic, and both players draw one of the cards. The card that fits the topic best wins. So my favorite topics are better name for an arcade game, most likely to win an Oscar, Indiana Jones and the, better CB radio trucker handle, and best lifetime original movie. And if you pick that one, by the way, you are drawing dead if your opponent reveals crib swap. So just some more general life advice. When you're making purchases, spend more money on things you use often. Gravity is in effect 24 hours a day. So your shoes, your bed, your computer chair, your car is all that lies between you and the ground. Do not skimp on those. We tend to remember our own embarrassments first and foremost, but no one else gives them a second thought. People remember you for how you treat them. Adjust accordingly. Don't be afraid to do something nice for a stranger. The secret to happiness, at least in my opinion, is your appreciation of the small stuff. Milestones are fleeting and money only goes so far. Make time for yourself every day to do something that you enjoy. Eat food that both tastes good and makes your body feel good. And don't be afraid to laugh in public, especially at sign-offs. And one final note, thank you all so much. I hope you've learned as much as I have. Thank you.